and welcome to our evening. A conversation that I'm eager to have because I know very little about the position of CTO. And I think this is a great opportunity not only to talk about some of the newest innovations in video online and various platforms, but also get a better understanding of what the management literature would refer to as the newest of the chief executive positions or titles in companies in the U.S. and abroad. And Michael, I want to start with you. Noticed from reading your bio that you've held the position of CTO at Time Warner and at Dell. No longer hold that title, but it's
I actually do.
You do. Okay,
I'm also
it's just not
VP.
in your bio. And I wonder if you might just talk to us generally about the position, what a CTO does, main responsibilities, and even more perhaps what a CTO doesn't do. I mean, how we distinguish a CTO from some of the other executive officers and some of the people that would report to you as opposed to the people that you might report to.
I've actually been a CTO since the early 90s. So when websites first started becoming in vogue, or there was the internet, and then you started working on web properties, small startups started calling their folks chief technology officers as opposed to a CIO, which big media companies, if they were dealing with them, or ad agencies had. And CIOs tend to run back office systems. CTOs tend to look at the raw technology that was used for a product, let's say. And so in my mind, I went down a path of either CIO, or it was more administrative and managing IT staff, which I still do somewhat, but CTO is going more towards how technology is used within a business applied towards a product. If you're in a small company, I spend a lot of time working with startups. A CTO may be head of development. They may run server farms. They may actually design the product themselves. If you're in a big company like I am, they may work on more fundamental things like email systems. I run a thing called a program management office, which is a group of directors of program management that oversee really huge initiatives, and they're like project managers, but they deal with a whole bunch of projects at one time. So we were just talking about this before the panel started. CTOs can have a lot of different responsibilities. We tend to be obviously more technically inclined than administrative. And I came up through a development and architecture pathway, so my experience is around how technology is designed. CIOs that I know tend to come up, sometimes they come up through the financial side, or just purely administrative. That's a start.
Rajiv, you're at Condé Nast now, and Catherine Williams was kind enough to give me a job description, not yours, it turns out, but a job description for a chief technology officer. And I want to read you one of the lead responsibilities. It says, to lead IT strategic and operational planning to achieve business goals by fostering innovation, prioritizing IT initiatives, and coordinating the evaluation, deployment, and management of current and future IT systems across the organization. Does that describe anything that you do at Condé Nast?
I would say yes. A large part of it, the Chief Technology Officer or VP Technology's job in companies like ours is around execution and development of product. As Michael mentioned, the traditional CIO's role is running a lot of back office systems, whether it's the payroll processing system, telephone systems, office desktop support. But the VP Technology, who's involved in product development, is involved in a lot of initiatives. So the part where in the description you mentioned, you talked about business, it is to make sure that the goals of the business groups are achieved. So for example, typically you would find counterparts to the VP Technology role. A person could be the VP of the product department, for example. The product group might be responsible for defining and setting up the requirements for how a product should be developed, what features it should have. Other people, a VP of technology in a media company might work closely with, could be the VP of editorial or the content group. So there are various business groups. There's also the finance side where you need to make sure that the money you spend is very wisely spent and economically, especially in this climate. Especially things like serving videos, expensive to do. So media companies have to do that. So a lot of what's in there does does fit into that description. And some companies do have a distinction. They have, the CTO or the VP technology. And again, building on what Michael talked about, the role varies depending on the size of the company. Often people, could be a chief architect or a technology expert, and often, they would have come through that kind of a track. And I too, again, like Michael, have come from a development path. What that means is that I was a software developer, worked with people closely who were software developers, and that's the background. The other background sometimes VP technology CTO types could be from technology operations, the people who run server farms, the people who are involved in cloud computing, things like that. And so right now the role really involves balancing a couple of areas. One is development, where by nature you are more risk-taking because you have to innovate. That's one kind of a personality. The other is operations, where you have to be a different kind of person who's very conservative. For example, if the developers want to build software and they want to launch it on the website, the development side says, we want to make this work, launch this on the site. But on the other hand, the operations person is more conservative and says, wait, but this could make the site crash. Have you thought about this? Somebody could hack our site if you launch the software in a hurry. So a part of a CTO's job is to balance those two departments who are sometimes, I wouldn't say in conflict, but their goal is to balance each other. They could be responsible for other areas like quality assurance. So a lot of the CTO's job is also to balance conflict between people who ultimately have the same goal, but they're balancing each other out. So it's quality assurance, technology operations, software development. And then a large part is, it's also very important to understand technology. I agree. I think in a CIO role, somebody can come from a finance or accounting background and be able to manage, the company's spending on email and other things very well. But to be in a CTO role and to have the respect of your technology department, you sometimes need to be, even if you don't go there and write code, you need to be able to talk about the architecture and discuss things and help people out, mentoring and coaching. That's a big part of the job.
Right, and I would think that in particular at a place like Condé Nast, which is going through a major transition in its business model, that you find yourself in the position of dealing with conflict and differing opinions probably every day, and it's something I want to get back to when we talk a bit more about what you do day-to-day at Condé Nast. But our last guest, just to my right, is Evan Schechtman, and Evan has been around for quite a few years in various guises in this business.
I look 12, but yeah, I've been around for a while.
Well, I was going to say in the world of online media, 12 is pretty much it.
Yeah.
And Evan is at Radical Media. I had a chance this afternoon to go down memory lane and look at an old video of Superman and Seinfeld from 2004, I believe. Pretty hilarious stuff. Evan, Radical Media, unlike Condé Nast Hearst, it appears to me from the outside to be primarily in the content production business for clients, advertisers, television, music videos, documentary, short and long form. So talk a little bit about the specifics of being a CTO at a firm like at Radical Media.
Yeah, I could say there's an overlap of a lot of the things that these gentlemen have been talking about that rings true in the job. Because we're a multidisciplinary company, I have to actually set standards and practices for everything from video acquisition, editorial platforms, all the way through the platforms we choose to deliver the digital message. And the great thing about standards is there's so many good ones to choose from. And being a global company and having technology be so accessible to content creators, everyone becomes a genius. But what I'm very careful to do is manage the downstream cost of production choices. For instance, if a frame rate choice that we make in shooting video on a catalog of 300 plus automobiles will have a huge impact on storage, the amount of time we spend rotoscoping or cleaning up, actual storage, streaming, CDN, end user experience. And so when you're a 360 company and you're delivering messages on a number of platforms, it becomes a pretty rough job to be able to help steer demystify technology for creative people in our environment, and make sure that I'm also meeting business goals. Especially when you're dealing with very creative people, they have no mind of budget or schedule or scope. They're creative. And so you ride them like a bull to a certain extent, making sure that there's a certain commonality and predictability to the work that we're doing, because technology touches every part of the message that we're trying to get out, no matter what the platform. So standards and practices is something that's very difficult to set. Evaluating new technologies that comes out. We've all been shooting on these great shoulder shooter and palm quarter cameras for years, and now everyone's shooting on still cameras, including large commercial campaigns for Major League Baseball or whomever. People are shooting on Canon 5Ds. And so we have to quickly, and we're not going to stop them from doing that. Innovation comes from the ground up in parts of our business. So I have to go ahead and evaluate the pros and cons of that kind of workflow, set the best practices for our organization. I can't stop people from shooting on anything they see fit, but I have to keep the quality up, deliver in a timely fashion, and make money on what it is that we're producing.
Abilities, and even more, perhaps, what a CTO doesn't do. I mean, how we distinguish a CTO from some of the other executive officers and some of the people that would report to you as opposed to the people that you might report to.
I've actually been a CTO since the...
And welcome to our evening. A conversation that I'm eager to have because I know very little about the position of CTO. And I think this is a great opportunity not only to talk about some of the newest innovations in video online and various platforms, but also get a better understanding of what I think the management literature would refer to as the newest of the chief executive positions or titles in companies in the U.S. and abroad. And Michael, I want to start with you. Noticed from reading your bio that you've held the position of CTO at Time Warner and at Dell. No longer hold that title, but it's
I actually do.
You do. Okay,
I'm also
it's just
a
not in
VP.
your bio. And I wonder if you might just talk to us generally about the position, what a CTO does, main responsibility.
The early 90s. So when websites first started becoming in vogue, or there was the internet, and then you started working on web properties, small startups started calling their folks chief technology officers as opposed to a CIO, which big